It was no surprise to hear Wolves boss Julian Lopetegui roundly dismissing Liverpool's interest in Matheus Nunes on Tuesday. The Reds are exploring their midfield options both short and long term, and the club's recruitment team have retained a long-standing interest in Nunes, who only moved to Wolverhampton in August from Sporting Lisbon. It was viewed as a major coup for Wolves when they signed Nunes for around £44 million in August. Manchester City and Liverpool were interested, and while it was Wolves with their enduring partnership with super agent Jorge Mendes who eventually struck the right terms, the Reds have not stopped watching from afar. The Portuguese market is one Liverpool have explored in great depth in recent years. Feedback from Pep Lijnders contacts at Porto, for example, gave glowing character references for Diogo Jota, and an initial £37 million move for Luis Diaz 12 months ago was successful thanks in no small part to those working on Liverpool's behalf in the same region. Current sporting director Julian Ward's contact book is an extensive one when it comes to Portuguese football too, having worked for the national side between 2008 and 2012 during Carlos Queiroz' stint as head coach. Ward may have not worked for Portugal for over a decade, but he has kept a closer eye than most on developments in the country since, and it's an area that Liverpool have exhaustively scouted in recent years. Ward, who's set to leave Anfield after over 10 years at the end of the season, also took charge of scouting in both Portugal and Spain between 2012 and 2015 for the Reds. Often the role is about definitively eliminating players as below the required standard as much as it is about identifying potential additions. A scout at Liverpool is not typically judged on the amount of players brought in from their particular area of the world. Such a model could lead to unsuitable players being brought in, and often tabs are kept on some due mainly to their age and more natural potential to improve as a result. Liverpool looked at both João Felix and Bruno Fernandes, for example, during their respective times at Benfica and Sporting prior to their big money moves to Atletico Madrid and Manchester United. In the case of Felix, it was decided that the transfer fee, one which saw Atletico eventually pay £113 million, was far too exorbitant, while Fernandes was a player who did pique interest at Anfield before it was accepted that £70 million plus was also too expensive for a player who it was thought was best utilised as a number 10, a position that doesn't really exist in Klopp's midfield. So it should come as no surprise to learn that Liverpool have continued to retain an interest in the emerging prospects of the Premier League. With the captures of Diaz from Porto and Nunes at Benfica, the Reds could yet to commit to as much as £135 million for the pair if the total add-ons are reached. It's also no shock to hear of links to Benfica's Argentina World Cup winner Enzo Fernandez. At a time when midfield remains nearly and most in need of attention at Anfield, speculation involving the South American last month did not appear to be too unrealistic, particularly when it was factored in how Liverpool amicably wrapped up negotiations for Nunes just a few months prior with Benfica. Given the relatively small department compared to clubs of compatible size in the Premier League, Liverpool's scouting team do not necessarily focus on one particular player when attending matches. Instead, those tasked with talent spotting are more often than not dispatched to keep an eye on several performers in the same match. And Fernandes, given his talent and age, will have had the rule run over him during Benfica's fixtures as a result. It's understood that there will be a particular focus on displays in the Champions League too, where the standard is generally accepted to be greater than domestic matches where Benfica often dominates unless up against Porto or Sporting. Despite all of that, it's understood that Fernandes is not currently one of the midfielders under consideration in the Anfield corridors of power. Links to Chelsea have intensified in recent days, and it's been reported that the 23-year-old could cost the Londoners a club record fee. That current figure stands at nearly £98 million that was paid for Romelu Lukaku back in 2021. If those who matter in the recruitment team are not convinced, it's unlikely that Liverpool will go anywhere near that sort of sum for any one player, so consider the Reds not in the running for Fernandes. Spinning plates has been the general phrase used to describe Liverpool's transfer interest in midfielders at present. With so much uncertainty around both the long-term ownership of the football club itself and whether or not Anfield will be able to even play the Champions League theme next term, planning for the future can be a difficult task. Then there's also the external factors of other clubs and their overtures to consider. For example, Liverpool's move for Diaz last year was brought forward by 6 months thanks to Tottenham registering their own interest, while the Reds have had to act fast between Christmas Eve and Boxing Day to pit Manchester United to Cody Gakpo. Liverpool have become masters at swift and decisive action when it's time to pursue a target. Back to Nunes, and while lack of Champions League football is not a huge detriment given that he signed for Wolves in the summer, the financial boost that comes with it would inevitably aid any pursuit. The Rio-born midfielder played twice for Sporting prior to his move to the Midlands in August, meaning that while he can technically sign for the third club this campaign, he can't actually play for one. Now that means that Liverpool are almost certainly not likely to act on any interest they have until the end of the season. Lopetegui and Wolves, it seems, can rest easy for now.